record to the cloud.
There we go.
It is recorded.
So, Adriaan, I have one question to ask by looking at your screen. Did you intentionally, can we see your screen? Is
Yeah.
that just, no, yeah, okay. Did you intentionally hyphenate nonsense?
I did.
Okay, I thought you might have. All right, take it away, my friend.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Good day to you, wherever we are in the world. Adriaan van der Rijkin. Been in the service management space since 1992. So I've seen a lot. Doesn't mean that I've seen a lot of good things. I've seen a lot of bad things. But one of the conversations that often pops up is about service level agreements. And for those who know me, I just sometimes like to play devil's advocate. I love ITSM, so I'm not dissing it. I just sometimes are dissing the way we try to implement it and use it. So one of those topics is service level management, service level agreements. I know that our OSC usually does 20-20-20, so 20 minutes presentation, 20 minutes for conversations. I'd like to mix the first two 20s. So feel free to throw in questions, comments. Don't like it, don't agree, all good, because I'd like to spark some conversation. And I'd like to mix it up because officially today I am an old man. So if you ask me a question about what I said 20 minutes ago, I may not remember. So please, let's make this interactive as much as we can. So the nonsense of SLAs, right? So that is basically what I'd like to talk about. Like what are they really good for? What is it doing for us? Does it do anything for us? So just to make sure that, because not everybody has been within ITIL for a long time, or is that versed with the topic, but an SLA, and just so you know where I'm coming from, the definition of the SLA is that it's a formal agreement between a provider of services and the receiver of services. So straightforward, but it is to understand that those are the two parties that are working with it, and then we have the variations on the theme, right? It could be an internal meeting, an internal agreement, and then we, at least in the old ITIL, because I'm, like I said, I'm an old man. So in the old ITIL we would talk about operational level agreements, or it can be between a third party outside that providing services to us, and then we would call it an underpinning contract. At the end of the day, they're all just agreements. They're all just contracts. Its official purpose is to define expectations, to hold us accountable for providing these services on what we agreed upon, and so we can measure our service performance. My first question, and this is the first part where everybody can chime in, is where do we see SLAs? So do we see SLAs when we go to a hotel? We're starting off simple here, right? Easy questions. It's still, for me, it's early morning. So do we see them at hotels?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me, Simon, where do we sign the contract?
Well, we sign when we sign in, but there's a whole set of amenities and arrangements and things that they throw in there. The easiest one to think of is breakfast is from 6 to 9 in the lobby. And so you show up at 6, you expect breakfast. You show up at 9:01, you expect to be hungry.
Yep. True. Let's see if I can move it to the next one. How about restaurants? Or how about when I go to the grocery store? Right. So the point of this, and we can argue something about, is it an official agreement that I go into with the hotel? Is there a contract that I can point to when they're not opening up my breakfast at 6 o'clock? I think the important piece of all of this is, right, it's about the service industry, all the organizations that are providing services to our customers, to our receivers of the goods that we have, the consumers. The question is, what do we need to have an agreement, right?
Nope.
how is it helping us, right? Because again, just to go a little bit on the rest, because I love food. When I go to a restaurant, I never sign an agreement with a restaurant. But what do we? Oh, this is also a question. What do we all have when we go to a service provider? So when we go into a restaurant,
Expectations.
exactly, right. That is to me always the most important thing. And I do believe I never started it. Maybe I should have, but I think there's one process that we should have is expectation management. How do I manage expectations of my customers? Right? And I think that is a thing that, and the reason why I then call it non sense of service level agreements is because within IT, a lot of the customers that I work with, or a lot of organizations that I work with, are very focused on the technicality of it rather than on the intent of the SLA, right? So what is it used for? What is its purpose? Rather than this, at the end of the day, and I know I love that Zachary is here with Happy Signals, but it's all about expectations. It's about the experience, right? So are we doing something that our customer likes to hear, likes to receive, likes to see? So that is important, right? So that goes to the why question, right? So why do we have service level agreements in our organizations? Why do we as IT focus on that so much? And it says that you can actively participate. So if you want to throw in, feel free.
This is a really interesting topic because we've been doing some research where the people we're interviewing don't know that it's us calling, like through an external expert. And one big surprise has been like, I think that us who are in the experience space and think that this is important, we live in a bubble to some degree. It is amazing to listen to people that and understand their point of view. So, and regards to SLAs, one of the people that was interviewed just said that like we would never put into the contract something that we can't control. So that tells you something.
Yeah. Well, it is, right? And I mean, you said some interesting things there, right? Do we live in a bubble? I won't disagree with that one, right? In the sense that I think with a lot of things. I mean, like I said, I started in the ITSM space in 1992. I was in IT a few years before that, but at least the history that I went through, right, and the experiences that I have is that we as IT put ourselves in this bubble, right? We, especially in the beginning, right? We knew better than the customer. If something went wrong, it was the customer's fault by default, right? It was the user's fault, right? We did nothing wrong. I literally had a manager tell me, like, listen, when we put a desktop out there for the customer, before we leave, we know it works. So when it stops working, that's not our fault, right? So that is a little bit to my what you said, Zachary, in the bubble. That is the bubble that we put ourselves in, right? We were playing for being a higher power. So when we put ourselves all the time, like this topic, experience or service level agreement, we come from a very in-depth, very technical, studied perspective. And then I guess when you talk to your customers, it doesn't always line up, right? It's completely, and obviously we're people, right? So people have different opinions, different perceptions, different expectations. So it is very difficult in my mind also, especially if you have more than one customer, to manage all of this stuff from a technical perspective. So why do we have them, right? So why do we then still keep focusing on these agreements? Where I'm just a simple person. I try to start things out from a simplistic perspective. We can always make it more complex, right? I don't want to start with the complexity. So why do we have them? All right, so let's start with the question of then what is an example of a great SLA, if we even have these things, right? I mean, I have an example of a great SLA that I will show you in a second, but what would be some thoughts here? Like, have you guys seen them? And what makes it great? And if it's silent, that means that we've never seen a great SLA.
Well, the one that's great to me is one that's not even needed.
You know what, John? We didn't talk about this. I didn't pay you to say that, but it is a contract that is collecting dust on the shelf,
Yeah,
right? That to me is really the best contract. Because what does it mean when a contract or an agreement is collecting dust on the shelf, right? It basically is two extremes, right? There's two extremes that the customer is completely upset and doesn't absolutely not like what we're doing and just doesn't want to deal with us anymore. The positive one is that it's collecting dust because the customer is just extremely happy with what we're doing, and there's no need to look at it. Because
right.
my thought is always, if a customer starts looking at a level agreement and starts waving it in my face or pointing at it that, hey, you said this, that means by default they're not happy with what we're doing.
Yeah,
Right. So to me, an agreement that is collecting dust, a contract that's on the shelf, that is the best service level agreement that you can have. Now that doesn't mean, by the way, where I say the nonsense of SLA, right? That doesn't mean that there's no value in service level management. How do we manage the levels of services, right? That there is, by the way, there's one important thing for me why we have a service level agreement. Or there's a few important things, by the way, right? But again, I know this is interactive. I know I'm pushing a lot of things to the audience. That's just to make my life a little bit easier. But what are some thoughts from your end, right? Where I kept saying now for about 10 minutes that this is all nonsense. But what is then the importance of an SLA? Why do we still need to consider it? Why do we still need to think about this?
Well, I think it's important. There's an important distinction between internal SLAs and SLAs part of an MSP contract.
right.
You know, I have a good friend that ran global service delivery for a really large organization. And he used to brag, like, I knew how to drive a bus through the holes in the SLA. And his job was to make sure that the client didn't get to not pay.
Yeah.
And, that just irks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you meant that in a, hey, that's a good way, or if that's like, well, that's a sucky way to make a contract, right?
That's a sucky way to make a
Yeah.
contract. And you know what's interesting is that he originally, that was something he was really proud of. And then over the years, especially as he got more attuned to experience and what's really important, he realized this, I might have a great job with a great title and great pay, but this sucks. What I'm doing is not right. So, you know, he ended up leaving. And that was the primary driver, is because he was tasked to do that. Even if we failed on a measurement, his job was to prove that they didn't through, you know, a variety of analytics and whatever. And, you know, I could see how back in the early 2000s, you know, late 90s, I think he started there, maybe that would have been a challenge and fun. But after a while, you realize the impact to that, to the human being that needed support.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were born out of insurance, at least in the States. It's the same
Mhm.
idea as an insurance claims agent. They do everything they can to not, you know, pay out the claim, right? Because they're trying to
Yeah.
protect the company.
Yeah.
And instead of actually doing what's right, you know.
Yeah. David.
Oh, thank you. You said a moment ago, Adriaan, about how IT always said they knew better than the business or their customer.
Yes, sir.
The importance of an SLA now, from the customer perspective, which, by the way, I fundamentally disagree with what I'm going to say, but the importance to the customer is that they now think SLAs are important because they can hold their suppliers accountable.
Yeah.
And they use them as an exercise for tenders, to pick suppliers, as an exercise that helps them illustrate whether it's going to be value for money in a business case. They're actually fundamentally unimportant, but to the customer, that's the importance of an SLA nowadays.
Yeah. But that goes back to a little bit what I think we're all been saying now, and that Simon just said before you, right? It is about, it has more a legal purpose, right? A liability purpose than anything else, right? It has nothing, it has little to do anymore with the levels of service, right? It is all about, hey, if I don't like what you do, can I take you to court and will I win, right? Or can I take you to court and you still have to pay me? right? So that is really a lot of times we see that becomes the intent of the agreements that we're making. And obviously those are the agreements with the external parties, because I mean, it kind of would be weird if you start suing your own company, right? Like my IT department is not providing good service. But the threat of that is that in your internal organization, obviously an internal IT organization, and I've been there, can be outsourced, right? So if we don't like what the internal IT department is doing, then let's get rid of them, right? So there's a similar liability threat or reason why we want to make an agreement with the organization, but I'm not sure if the focus is really on the things what its true intent was to do, right? So, and I think what we're all saying, right? When we have an SLA, there's two things that are in my mind important that we need to do. Again, if I could get to the right screen, there we go. There's two things that are important, right? So what are the things that we do before we sign the SLA, and what are the things that we do after we sign the SLA, right? The signature of the SLA, that's basically the most important thing, right? That means that, well, let's talk about first, what do we do then before we sign the SLA? What is important as a service provider that is going to deliver services to a consumer? What are some of the things, this is not a limited list, but what are some of the things that we need to understand, right? So we need to know what the scope is of the services that I'm providing, right? What am I actually offering to my consumers, to my customers? Not always do all IT organizations understand literally what it is, what they do, because we also need to understand what the utility and the warranty is of the services that I'm providing, right? How does it fit the purpose, right? How can I make sure that the customer, the consumer of this is getting the things that they're looking for, that it has security, that it has availability? What are those requirements that exist, and why do they exist? Why is the customer asking for these things? And when we understand what that all is, do I have the ability as an organization to expand on that? Do I have the ability to make things better tomorrow than how I am doing this today? Right, so what is my continual improvement? What is the focus on that? How am I developing? Because not making things better tomorrow means that from a consumer's perspective, I'm really going backwards in my mind, right? There's this, I see that as an analogy. I see it very much in the car industry, for example, right? We had the first car that came off the assembly line. I'm not sure if it had a windshield. It certainly didn't have any roof on top of it. So the next iteration was, well, let's put a roof on it, right? So people, when it starts raining, can stay dry. Let's put a window in front of it. Well, when it rains and the window gets wet, we need to have windshield wipers on it. And then when it gets cold, we need to have some air conditioning in it. So it progressed on being better and better. But all those things that were innovations and new things that satisfied the expectations of customers, they are very normal today. And I remember 25 years ago that I could bring a portable DVD into a car, and that I could plug it in and it could be powered. That was awesome. They built it in. It's already there. Great. But now that's just the norm. So my point of that is that what is kind of exceeding the expectations of customers today is the norm for the customer tomorrow. And that goes back to this point, right? So can I continually work on trying to exceed my customers' expectations? Because that's very much a primary way to keep customers happy. And then obviously the flip side of that, well, what are my constraints, right? So how am I limited to what the customer wants? So truly understand the customer requirements. And I really say, really understand the customer requirements, right? It's not just listen to them, but talk through them. My other example of that is often we talk to customers about availability of services. And there was a time that the 5 nines were so important. But if you talk to your customers through the 5 nines, like, you know how much time that is, right? So it's 5 minutes and 45 seconds, I believe, in a 365, 24/7 service. If you then talk to the customer and say, listen, if we want to do that, we could, but that's going to cost a lot of money. What about if we're down an hour a month? What if we're down 2 hours a month, but we try to limit that to times that are not important to you? That conversation, right? Again, trying to truly understand the requirement of the customer, what is their need, leads them to, you don't have to be the 5 nines. Maybe you're good with 4 nines. Maybe you're good with 98%. So that is truly understanding the requirements. John.
I don't know if this is a question or a thought really, but I'm wondering if we defined some services less as IT services and more as business services, we could get away from some of the IT language and content. I know that IT is everywhere, but
Sure.
it just seems like if we we're IT, we kind of get sucked into the weeds, and the customer doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if we defined it as a business service, we wouldn't fall into that trap.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you on the premise that IT language is always a no-no, right? And whether we call it business service, IT service, just call it a service. We should always have it in, and we should have conversations with the customer in their language, on their terms, right? Because otherwise they would be buying into something that they really don't fully understand. But that does mean we, as the service provider, again, that's what part of what I'm trying to say here, right? By understanding the customer requirements means you need to understand the language that they're speaking to you, right? And not translate that or try to translate that even during the meeting into what that means for IT. What are the IT terms for that?
Yeah.
Right. So I agree with you on that one as well. I think what I found, what always helps, and I know this is a difficult one, but be open and honest about your constraints, right? Don't sign with the customer on an agreement and then later on ask for forgiveness, right? Say, oh, well, we cannot do that because of X, Y, and Z, right? Just say upfront, I cannot meet those requirements.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, in this relationship, it's a little bit easier when it's internal. I do understand that than external, but you should build a trust relationship, right? I can trust you, and trusting means that I need to understand what your capabilities are and what your constraints are, so I can anticipate that and I can work with you on that. And if you then, which is then my next point, when you know your constraints and when you know what the challenges are that you're creating with those constraints on the customer side, then basically you can start creating your first service improvement plan. Right? So what do I need to do to get closer to what the customer is asking for? And now we're collaborating. Now we're working together. Because I do have seen over all these years, and again, doesn't mean that all customers are that way, but most of the customers that I work with on the receiving end, they have a level of understanding that not everything is possible, right? That there are things that are limited, especially when you throw in the fact that things cost money, right? So we can do these things for you, customer, but understand that that raises the cost to a level that you might not want to be. So what is that balance, and what does it mean then for the services that we're providing to you? So to me, these are the important things before we sign the contract, or some at least of the primary ones. That there's a ton more, right? But it is, yeah, co-creation, right? That's basically what I'm talking about. So that is important, right? So once we now understand all the requirements, once we understand the constraints, once we have the improvement plan on the table with the customer, like we are going to do this for you, we can basically then sign on the dotted line, right? Let's put that a little bit on paper. But again, that is just, in my mind, as a reference for the provider to always to go back to, like, oh yeah, I remember this is what we actually promised. So let's include that. Let's try to work on that. Let's provide that to the customer. The important thing then becomes, what are the things after we sign, right? So now we're going into the space of delivering the service. So obviously we need to get ready for that day one. So what are the specific things that the customer was asking for from a technical perspective? So let's make sure the things that I don't have yet, that I have agreed upon, that I'm capable of doing, let's put that in place. let's also make sure that the people that I am using to provide that service, that they are trained, that they're ready, that they have an understanding. Because that's the other big thing that I often run into. Right? We have conversations with the provider of services. They always send the A team. We talk about all the pies in the skies and the unicorns that exist. And then once we start the service, all of a sudden we have the C team that shows up. And it's not that I mind necessarily the C team, but the C team has not been informed. They don't even know what we agreed upon. Right? So the important point is that get that team ready. Let them understand. And also then, how do they have to work relationships with the customer? Right? So like I said, we have a plan. You need to activate that service improvement plan. So I'm already starting on improving for the next phase. How can I make things better the next time around? It sounds silly. We always keep saying that, but deliver your service with a smile, right? And again, it is different for each customer. I worked in an organization where I had different types of customers. I had multiple customers. They were internal, but multiple customers. I had customers that tell me, Adriaan, I just want to see you maybe once a month. I don't want to deal with this every time. If you just do what I want, we're good, right? Forget about it. I had customers where every time when I walked into the office, I just opened that door and kind of waved at them and said, hey, good morning. How are we today? How were things yesterday? And that was enough for them, right? Just the fact that I showed that I was interested, that their day was good and that everything was okay was good enough for them, right? But that is, again, it is with a smile, right? I am aligning with the needs of the customer. And that avoids a lot of, let's look at the contract. What did I agree upon? So when things are getting tough, because they will get tough, smile a little bit more, right? Again, if we started on the premise of co-creation, right? The word that you use, John, co-creation, on the premise of we are understanding each other's challenges, then when things get tough, the customer was already somewhat aware of that, right? We told them that there are situations where we just cannot meet your requirements. And when that happens, I mean, let's at least acknowledge that. Let's not try to hide it. Let's not just acknowledge, talk to the customer. We co-create and we co-solve the problems. What can we do? How are we going to fix this? So it's all about relationship, or like Zachary would say, it's all about experience, right? What is the experience that I'm providing to the customer? Am I able, even in a tough situation, even when I know that I'm probably not delivering the service that the customer is looking for, can I create an experience for the customer that gives them the understanding and the perception that I care about what I'm doing and that I care about what I'm trying to deliver? So obviously with an SLA then, we need to monitor our performance, right? That is what it helps. It helps us to give us a little bit of a target. Also then monitor if the customers keep smiling back to you, right? Is if they're not smiling back to you, then you know that you have a problem. Again, I don't have to look at an agreement. I don't have to wait for my weekly or monthly or quarterly call with them. I know because all of a sudden they become a little bit more quiet, or they become a little bit more rude, or they don't smile anymore. So I know what's going on. Zachary.
What's the appetite for actually caring about the relationship with the end user or the customer beyond the service management tower of IT? Sorry, the big question.
Trying to
maybe after
interpret
that.
your question. If you work with
Yeah.
HR, they are very much in favor of having a relationship, right? That
Let's
is their.
say,
Go
but
ahead.
let's say you're talking about, for example, like about, I don't know, enterprise architects, infrastructure people, maybe like even business relationship managers that at the moment are just like order takers and like project delivery people.
Well, yeah, I think that goes back. That's a good question, Zachary. I think it goes back also that as an organization, right? In this case, as an IT service provider, for example, the question is, what type of organization do you want to be, right? What organization does your consumer like to have? And my analogy there is always like, for a burger, I can go to a fast food restaurant, or I can go to a 2-star Michelin restaurant for a burger, right? In the end, it's a burger, but it is it's a different service that I'm providing, the same product, a different service, but then the culture in the organization of a two-star two-star Michelin stars is different than in a fast food restaurant, right? So it all comes down, I think, in my mind, of what you're asking is, what is the culture the organization is creating? What is the attitude and behavior associated with that culture that I am enabling the organization with, right? So there needs to be an active involvement, in my mind here, with leadership of an organization that says, listen, we feel that it's important to have a great relationship. We feel that it's important that you have a smile on your face when you talk to the customer. And that's what I need you to do, right? So it's and I know it's not that easy, but first of all, you need to enable, you need to broadcast that culture, you need to enforce that attitude and that behavior in an organization. And then you, as leaders, you need to also enhance that by giving the good example, but also by for example, giving the people that do exceptionally well, to give them kudos in some way, shape, or form, right? A reward of, hey, here's an example of how we want to interact. But I think also maybe, and I'll stop there and let some other people chime in. I think it's also important to show to an organization what happens if we don't do that, right? How does it damage the relationship with the customer? How does it impact potential contracts? What revenue are we potentially losing, or what goodwill are we losing if we're not focusing on these relationships and that kind of stuff? But that's just my thoughts, Zachary. And I see Sean has his hand up too.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic! I wasn't sure if sorry, I had an IT problem. I had to log a ticket. No, I didn't. But anyway, I think I love this conversation, and I'm with you, Adriaan. I've been in IT a long time. SLAs in the old days was quite simple: uptime, downtime. You know, because we used to have a lot of downtime. Now we don't. And your kitchen analogy and all that I love, because for me, SLAs. Yeah, they probably have a place. They probably do have a place, and you've explained that. But I think ultimately our SLA is kind of like the menu today. The menu is of the services we got, and included in those services are what makes up that dish that you're going to order, that product. That's your SLA, and pretty much of the time there's a number against that, and those numbers today a little bit kind of, I think, are almost not irrelevant, because ultimately they always needed something green with SLAs, because I think our technology has moved on, and that's why I think it's always measuring the experience after the SLA that really helps. So I get that there's a place for it. I think my old head with SLAs is always about uptime, downtime, but I think the SLA is the menu that makes up the ingredients of your services. And what we really got to get better measuring, and Zachary will love this, is the experience of those services. The experience of did we meet those SLAs? Did we serve you, as you say, with a smiling face? So the product is good. It's how you experience the product afterwards, which is where we have to be heading. And I also think that the SLAs thing, it is, you're right. Somebody said earlier, it's where we used to hold people to account in IT, whether that's your MSP or whatever. This is our tool for holding you to account. You have to do this. If you don't, we're going to give you a penalty or slap your wrist. I think those days we need to move on from, and we need to move into that space of capturing the experience, because ultimately, I think our IT products are pretty damn good these days.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Sean. Right? Yes, you and I come probably from a time where it was very technology focused, right? I remember the days when we had. I mean, I brought up the 5 nines, right? But we got to a point where we were arguing with the customer about, hey, you guys said it was going to be 99.99%, and it was 99.89%. Like, customer, tell me the difference between 99.89% and 99.91%. What's the difference, right? From a next, so the one is you shout at me and tell me that I did a shitty job, and when it's 0.02% higher, then we're fantastic and get thumbs up, right? To what you're saying, the point is like it's all about the experience, right? Did the availability of the service, forget about the number. Was there any issue in your organization with the fact that we were not available a certain amount of time? If that was so, shame on us, right? We should look at what happened and how can we make that better. If you had no issue, let's move on, right? But don't use the number as a scientific differentiator between I'm happy or I'm unhappy, right? And that is where I say here also on the screen, right, is that I always tell everybody you need to be open and honest about your mistakes, right? When you're not meeting a service level agreement, when whatever it may be, anything that you promised, be open and honest about it, but be economical with the truth, right? So I'm not advocating to lie. I'm just saying if the customer didn't notice that you messed up, why would you wake up sleeping dogs? Why are we going to have this conversation with you and argue with you about it if you didn't even notice that there was a mistake and that something went wrong? Then let's just forget about it. Let it be water under the bridge. I just know that something went wrong, and I'm going to make sure internally that we are going to try to prevent that from happening again. But let's not have that conversation with the customer, right? So that's where I'm also saying we need to be economical with the truth at some point. It's all about how did the customer experience this? And is the customer smiling to me when I sit down at the table? Right? That is really a very important thing, right? And so managing customer perceptions, we said that now a couple of times. Managing customer perception, I think, is a very important thing. The customer expectation. How can I make sure that the customer is happy with what I'm doing? And that's not always the technical side of the house, right? It's not always about the availability. It's not always about the first call resolution. It's not about any of that, right? Your mean time to repair. It's about when, I think especially when things went wrong, was I there for the customer to help them, support them, and still in the end got them as close as possible to what they were looking for, right? So again, what is the relationship that I have with them? Can they trust me in what I'm trying to do with them? I think that's important. And then I will go into the last bit, and then we can further discuss. But we've already mentioned a little bit about reporting, right? And again, I said this now for 30 years, and I know it's difficult because we love numbers, we love being exact, and we love being scientific. But reporting is about, again, opening up the door and telling and asking the customer, hey, are we thumbs up today? And if he says thumbs up, that was my report, right? We're good, right? I don't have to give him a number of like, oh, my first call rate resolution was 72.7%. And he goes, well, that's shitty, Adriaan, because we agreed on 75%, right? But if I just say, hey, were we good on the calls yesterday? And he said, yeah, I haven't heard anybody complain. Great. Doesn't matter if it was 60, doesn't matter if it was 90. It's about what is the experience. So the last thing about, this is my last slide, right? Oh, no, it's not. Jeez, I forgot all the after stuff. I think we're all getting the point a little bit here, right? So but that was the before stuff. So after, on reporting, oh, sorry, it is reporting. I was just expecting a different slide. About reporting. So it is all about what we've been talking about now is what do I think on how you feel, customer, right? So when I do an official report status back and I have a meeting with the customer, then I will go in and say, customer, I think about this service, I think you feel a little bit shitty, right? These 4 services, I think you should feel fantastic, right? And then I'm asking them, do you agree with that, right? Do you think that we were doing a lousy job here? And then the customer can tell me 2 things. He can say like, I agree with you, Adriaan, that was really sucky, right? So now we agree, we're aligned, and we can talk about what can we do? What do we need to do to not have this happen again? He can also say, I don't agree, Adriaan, right? I don't think it was that bad. And that's also when I say everything was good, right? They can say, I agree with you, it was fantastic. But they can say like, well, listen, this one was really not that good. And let me tell you why. The point of that is it's about the conversation. It's not about the outcome of the metrics. It's not about the outcome of the report. It's about that I'm having the conversation. How can we align closer to each other? How can I start understanding you better, customer, on what you're looking for? Right. So when I said it was bad and you said it was good, that means I misunderstood you. I'm focusing on things that don't matter to you, because the things that matter to you, they were good. So let me try to understand that. And the reverse is the same. If I think that all we did, all we were doing was giving you a good service, and you tell me like it wasn't, then I'm misunderstanding you. So tell me, customer, what it is that is important for you that I did not think about, that I was not taking into consideration. So it's about creating that alignment and being better on how we serve each other and how we understand each other. I think that's the most important part of the reporting that we do with a customer. Right, so we can then collaborate on an improvement plan and how can we make it better. So what I'm saying is, let's try not to use the numbers. I know this is not new things. We use traffic lights, we use these metrics, but it's all about aligning our feelings, our perceptions of the service, and do I understand what the customer is expecting, and am I exceeding that in one way, shape, or form? And I know that is somewhat challenging because not every customer is the same, right? Because one customer that I deliver a service to, then and the same service to as another customer, one customer can be happy with that and the other one is maybe not happy with that. But I should be able, as a provider, I should be able to deal with that. I should be able to manage that relationship, handle that, again, collaborate, tell them what my constraints are, tell them what my capabilities are, and then I think we have a better relationship, and I think we have a better way of it provides me less headaches. I don't have to wake up at night. My customer doesn't have to wake up at night because we are aligned. We have full understanding of our capabilities and our challenges. And again, the customer trusts that we will be there the moment that they need us. And with that, I'll open it up for more comments.
So I don't know who you're going to call. I have my hand up. I don't know. I saw John did too. John, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Simon. Yeah.
So you guys have already heard me. I don't use SLAs internally at all because I think they're just ridiculous. But the reason why is because so many times they're based on time. And we pick an hour because we know how to think about it when we talk to our customers, which I don't call them customers, but we talk to the people, consumers, I think you guys used earlier. We talk to our consumers, they think about hours because it's easy. We can say, well, if this is down for an hour, it would be a problem, or down for 2 hours, or if it took 30 minutes to respond to me on a ticket for this particular service, it would be a problem, or whatever, right? And similarly, if you look in an accounting world, depreciation, which is just how you basically allocate cost over time, or is done over time because it's the easiest. But what happens is we miss and we lose sight of what it is we actually are in their world of their value stream, if you want to think of it. So let's assume we're providing email to a sales team. Okay, let's just go with that. Very simple. So we have a sales team, we provide them email. We can't think about, what if email was down for an hour? We need to think about, well, what are the revenue targets for this quarter? Revenue targets for this quarter is $100 million. Okay, well, that means you have to send out how many leads? We have to send out 30 leads an hour. Okay, so if there's 30 leads an hour, in order to maintain that, then how long does it take you to send out an email for a lead? 1 minute. Well, in that case, I need to respond to you within 30 minutes. Right? It needs to be rooted in what they do, not some arbitrary time because Julius Caesar had a 12-month calendar and 24 hours a day. That's what this shit is. 20 minutes. I don't know. 20 minutes sounds cool. What did you make up 20 minutes? Nah, I don't know. What does 20 minutes mean to our business? Yeah. And so the sales team has a goal. They have a critical path, if you think of project management, of all the elements and things that they need to do to meet that goal and send out that many cold call emails or what. Again, I'm just picking a random service. They need to send out that many cold call emails. Well, in that case, there's some level of tolerance that they can have. And there's a point where, okay, at this point, if email is not working, I'm not able to send those emails, which we're going to miss our revenue targets, which is what really matters to the business, right? Yeah. So the SLAs Just like in depreciation, you can have a machine, instead of it depreciating over time, it can be depreciated over how many widgets it's produced, right? So there's different types of accounting methods, and you should take those things and say, okay, what am I actually doing for the sales team? Because by the way, your SLA should be different for your sales team than it should be for your accounting team, for your everybody else, because they all use email differently, and it all means something different to what they do. And even though it's still email, but I see so many times people build SLAs in a vacuum. They're like, email, great. Email tickets, get this. Email needs to be up, blah, 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 blah. And they don't think about all the different use cases and how vital or not vital something like email or their particular service that they're talking about is. And they don't stack ranking against all the other services. So first off, get away from time. You have to use time, but get away from time first. Talk about what it is you're doing. You're making widgets. How many widgets you got to make, bro? I got to make 1,000 widgets. Great. We got to make sure the machine is up for 1,000 widgets. What if it's up for 10,000 widgets? We don't need that. That's excess. It's overkill. As long as you can make the 1,000 widgets when you made it. Someone mentioned earlier, payroll being down 3 hours before it's due is way different than payroll being down 3 weeks before it's due, right? Major difference. So you got to understand the business. You can't just come up with hours because they sound cool, because it's easy for us to talk about. 1 hour. Oh, okay. That's cool. 1/24th of a day. How fun is that? It means nothing to the business, right?
I think just to add what you said, right? What I think helps, because we did that one time, is we would visit the customer, and we would walk around with them to really show where our services are being used. So we had, and this is a long time ago, this is when we still had mainframes, we would have a print job for that customer every day. And every now and then that print job would stop, would not work, would abort, and we would always solve it the next day. So that also happens on Sundays, especially Sundays, right? We want to be home with our family. So that would abort, we would just leave it and go home. So we had this tour, we went through the warehouse, and I go like, guys, here's that printer that prints these labels that you produce. The whole week doesn't really matter. On Sunday, we get 50 trucks standing in front of a warehouse to be loaded to take our products to where the stores that are out in the country. If we don't have these labels, these truck drivers are just sitting here, not going anywhere, and we're not basically restocking our stores. That's the impact of you not fixing the job of printing labels. That makes it real, right? And that is really to your point, Simon. The rest doesn't matter. It is about, do you understand the impact of not doing or fulfilling the requirements, the needs of the customer in what you do? You're absolutely right. I think John had his hand up too. Do you still have your hand up, John?
Yeah, no, I just was going to echo. It seems like the trend that we're on is we're tailoring the agreements to different market segments, right? That's happening more and more as you get more and more personalized, and that becomes, that raises the bar, makes it much more difficult to manage SLAs. But that's the world that we live in right now.
Yeah.
So that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. I've actually turned AI loose in my organization to examine when people use applications and when people use printers and when people use the services we're providing, to understand how to better provide support and service. And like you said, Adriaan, I found out that you're using that printer on Sunday, right? I'm not working on Sunday, but I found out the warehouse is using the printer on Sunday because of what I'm letting crawl on my logs and everything. So basically what I'm doing is like, here's all my logs. Here's what people are logging in. Here's what they're doing. And I find out I have an entire team that works, like my executive team. They're up between 10 and 11 every night sending emails. I figured that out. So I know now, okay, they're reading their emails at night after the family goes to bed. And now I need to provide, I need to make sure that we don't have change windows in that time or whatever, right? So now I've turned around and said, all my logs for all my applications, I let AI crawl through them, and I ask them, hey, ask AI, hey, when are people using this? And then how vital does it appear to be used, right, in their day-to-day?
That's perfect.
Yeah, but for me,
that's perfect.
Sorry, I'll add to that. There's always an impetus on the organization to define what it needs. And often we put so much of that on ourselves. I need to figure out, tell me what you're doing. I don't know why we're stepping away from the fact of, it's critical for me. I'm operating at this time. I use it for this. So that that we can crawl it with AI, but why can't they open their mouth and tell me when you're using stuff so I can talk about it? And also, Can I staff for it? Is it something outside of the scope of what we all agreed on that has a cost associated that we need to talk about? So in so many of these things, we give them a really loose leash of they need to actually open their mouths, and communication's a two-way thing. Yep. I can only understand what you tell me and what you are open about telling me. And in a lot of cases, we keep saying we have to figure out what the business wants. No, their job is to tell us what they need.
Well,
our job isn't to be. We're not deep oil drillers.
Sometimes they don't always tell you the truth, though. Either.
Oh, I know, but that's still on them.
Well,
we're not deep oil drillers trying to figure out where to find the oil. They know what they want, and that's excusing them from telling us is not a good. It's not helpful.
Yeah,
you're 100% right. But they don't know how many other people are like them. So until I did this experiment with my logs, right, they didn't know, like every person didn't know that they all had this window from 10 to 11 where like 20 different people were in their email. If you just ask them, he's like, I don't know, I use email whenever during the day. They don't even think about it. And they don't think that everyone else's experience, where it stacks up and lines up to build those moments in time where things are very important, or other moments where they may be less important because only one or two people are using the service.
Oh, yeah. But I think part of that.
Let me give you an example, a little bit of an example of that one, right? Because it's not that I'm disagreeing with you, right? That yes, we should have this open conversation and understanding. So, but the one thing that we always talk about, they always say, right, is that you will only miss the light in your refrigerator when it's not working, right? Meaning that customers don't always. I have to be on the side of customers, sometimes just not realizing how important a specific piece is for them, right? Because they expect email just to be there. And the fact that it then doesn't work, that is the moment they realize like, oh shit, right? I really am depending on that type of service. So there's a little bit of a balance of that as well, right? So I'm with you, but sometimes they just don't, don't think about it.
But
guys,
again,
I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt. So sorry, I'm going to interrupt
Picture.
1 second, just because it's time to take the picture. And so let me do that.
No pictures during heated discussions.
All right, here we go. 3, 2. Discuss away. Talk amongst yourselves. Right. Sorry about that.
The only point I would make is it's because we don't do a really good job of articulating the value of the things we do. We discount it as much as everyone else. It's BAO. It's keep the lights on. I'm a big fan of saying, well, take the lights away and tell me what else you can do in the business. If the answer is nothing, then the lights are the most valuable thing you've got going. People forget all the time that the value of the foundational things allows those wonderful shiny objects to work. And we don't do a good job of articulating, here's what you lose if this isn't there. Here's what you can't do. Here's what's critical to you that ceases to be of use. Like we forget that run is the only place where value exists.
No, I agree with you, right? And I think it was before you joined, Zachary said about how we are sometimes in a bubble, right? So I think there was a part of that. We put ourselves in a bubble. We felt also for a long time that we don't have to express the value that we're doing, right? It should be self-evident that without IT, the world doesn't exist, right? But that's not how it is, at least not nowadays, how it needs to be. We need to express the value. Our customers are asking for what value do you bring to the table other than, like you said, keeping the lights on.
Yeah, but that's, like I said, a lot of that's still on them, and we excuse a lot. I never see them running off saying, what's the value of running finance? Like, where is that question running? They fully understand what that department's value is, and there's no ambiguity in the fact that they think it's necessary. Why here all of a sudden, it's not
a unique IT problem. I'll give you that one.
Yeah, but I think it might be more so. Sorry, I know.
Simon.
I got to drop. No, I just want you to add me on LinkedIn, bro. I don't know your name. I just see V Howden. I don't know what that means. I messaged it's the first initial last name. Add me on LinkedIn. I love what you're saying. I got to go. Adriaan, really good presentation, bro. Great stuff.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good one.
Later.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, I'm late. Nice to meet those I don't know. I know some of you. So.
Nice
and I know John, at least, from LinkedIn.
Yeah, before
at least I think it's a wrap because it's 10:01.
Adriaan, happy birthday.
Thank you, sir.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
happy
you.
birthday.
I'm adding a birthday hat to him.
Everybody eat a piece of cake. Have a drink.
Okay. Will do. That's an SLA
All
I
right.
can get with.
Take care, folks.
All right. Bye, all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
See you next Friday.
Bye.